Namaskar and welcome to this exciting show of Sattology. And I wish all the new people who are coming on this show first time live very good luck and I hope you have a pleasant experience. So many of you are not from Indian background. It's the first time you're listening to this talk. So Nilesh and I have been talking. Nilesh is an expert, subject matter expert on this. And I have been speaking on this topic for some time. The purpose of this conversation is to give historical, astronomical, and other science, modern sciences based conclusive evidence to the happening in the past. So we are going from past and coming in, bringing it to the present relevance on the dates. The Western world is also struggling with the dates on the Western theology point of view. But in our case, we have more evidences to prove that the events actually happened. So with that, I would like to welcome Shri Nilesh Oak to the show. Namaskar, Nilesh ji, and welcome.
Namaskar. Yeah. Namaskar, Aditya ji.
Namaskar. So Nilesh ji, we discussed the how the ocean, the Dwarka got submerged and oceans took over, and it was a concurrence across the world, not just in Dwarka. And you put that so well, putting the examples from the historical things happened. Today, one of the things which I had in mind, and also the example of earthquake is very relevant here. When you measure an earthquake, you have to measure on three parameters: the intensity, the location, and also the parameter that what led to that earthquake. The another aspect is when people talk about Krishna. And even though we know from the Quranic evidence and the writings that the entire family got destroyed, but still we see Samba's son opening temples in Vrindavan.
Uh-huh.
So there were some people left, and the reason given is that he was at that time in Vrindavan. When that occurrence happened, then Samba's son was in Vrindavan. So with that, we want to begin the conversation that how genealogically the evidence of Mahabharata stands.
Okay. Great point. So if we look at the Mahabharat war, we also talk about 18 Aukshohini soldiers,
Right.
And if we take a certain definition given in the Mahabharata itself, that comes to around 4 million people. Okay. Now I'm talking the Mahabharat war.
Yeah.
So and the Mahabharata war says everyone was killed or everyone died except the few 7 people, right? Now when they say that, they are referring to those 7 people. So 5 Pandavas, Satyaki, Krishna, Sanjay, and then Krupacharya and Ashwatthama, and we hear those names. These names are mentioned in the sense of the key warriors. Of course, there were few others, key warriors, who were also there. So they survived. And of course, many other soldiers, and not everyone necessarily participated in the war. Now, the same thing happened with the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. In fact, Krishna had seen the signs, of this flooding of destruction of Dwarka coming. And he had requested Arjun, he had said, please take care of Dwarka, especially the ladies of Dwarka and other residents of Dwarka. When that happens. So actually when Arjun came there and Arjun rescued many people. Now we hear the descriptions of many ladies of Dwarka that were saved by Arjun, and then he tried to take them towards Hastinapur. But of course many men were also saved. And as you said correctly, there were also many other Yaduvamshi, Andhakas, Vrishnis. They were not necessarily everyone in Dwarka at the time of flooding. That is also because the kingdom of Dwarka had an influence over a broader period, broader geographical area. So there were people who were outside Dwarka and they did survive. However, what happened is that with a total destruction of the Dwarka, like suddenly their power was curtailed. Okay, their resources also went down, and as we saw in that previous episode. Remember, the water did not come up to even today's level, but actually went 3 meters above. So a lot of area that is right now is land was also underwater. So it was a massive devastation. And what that led is many of them, not just Yadus, but you saw many other Indian kings and Indian, you can call, genealogy, if you want to call them, of that, stock, Indian stock. They migrated outside India. Now, outside India, migrations are happening for a long time. I mean, we are talking 80,000 years, 60,000 years, 40,000 years, 50,000 years, 25,000 years. We have evidence for that. And I'll share some going back to say 15,000, 20,000 years. Okay. Nothing to do with Mahabharata. But there was a post Mahabharata migration, and there were people from the Yadu dynasty, but many other like a Kuru dynasty, and many others. They also moved outside India. And we find that evidence in genetics. And of course, they stayed in India. They went to other parts of India. And that's also we find, for example, right now, if you look at the last names, like, Yadav or Jadav, like in the whole Bihar, UP, also Maharashtra and many other areas, including going to the south, all the way further to the south. So these people did migrate to these other parts of India and outside India.
So in the Stri Parva of Mahabharata, Yudhishthir informs Dhritarashtra, 1 arab 66 crore people died in Mahabharata war. And that is a Sanskrit mein likha hua hai, because Dhritarashtra asked that how many people died. And then Dhritarashtra and Yudhishthir, all of them did the Pind Sanskar of all those people. So this is a recorded evidence of how many people died. And that was a question which was asked by one of the viewers in the last video. So I'm just answering that question to you. Now coming back to today's this thing. So the Samba's son, who started the temples in Vrindavan, I think Vrindavan was established by him, and he marked the places where the Kalia Nag pastime happened, and other pastimes happened in Vrindavan. It marked them. And he's the one who made the first temple from the shore of, which is where Nadwara is made by him. So these are the places which were done by him. So what happened to that genealogy, and what is the genealogical evidence of the Mahabharat war itself?
Okay, so we will come to Mahabharat war. It was not so much the genealogy evidence, but the effect of the fact that the huge number that you said, okay, and just the 18 Akshani accounts to like 4 million.
4 million.
And then you said a number which is even bigger, right? There could be other supporting actors in the war, right? I mean, they could have died too. So if we take that number, we will see the effect of that number. I mean, effect of the fact, this gender biased destruction, if you think, because all the people who fought in the war were men on both sides. So it's a gender biased destruction. Now, not a surprising thing. If you come to the Vietnam War, I mean, they say the American destruction, the ratio, the gender ratio, the man is to woman is like 18,000 is to 1, that, yeah. So you saw that in America happening in the Vietnam War too. But we will see the effect of that, because that time the population dynamics was different. Most of the other world was not as populated. We will come to that. But before I go there, so you mentioned Samba's son. Was it Vajra? I'm trying to think of a name.
Yes,
yeah. And then what Mahabharata tells us, and other Puranas also, is that Parikshit was put on the throne after many years, of course, 36 years after that, after the war. So almost at the same time, after the destruction of Dwarka. He was installed, the Parikshit was installed on the Hastinapur, and that Samba's son was installed at Indraprastha.
Yes.
Okay. So now it continued in Indraprastha. Unfortunately, with the period of time, we have possibly lost, unless we can find it or someone has it, the genealogy that followed to these times. Very recently, as you may know, with the case of Bhagwan Ram, like the Jaipur royalty claimed that they have the genealogy coming all the way from Ram to their times, our times, and they have like 330 names of the different kings. If we find something like this, that will be great, but to the best of my knowledge, we have not found any. So that's for like what happened to the Indraprastha's throne and what happened afterwards.
So from Krishna's time to now, So there is a list of 32 gurus. You know that 32 acharyas have come.
Ha.
That is
Yeah.
very well documented. But
Right.
Ramanujacharya has documented. Madhvacharya is part of it. And
Hmm.
so the different parampara have established 32 gurus
Yeah.
from Krishna's time to now. From Mahabharat time to now, we
Yeah.
should have at least 10 times more than that, at least 10 times who have studied
Mm-hmm.
stone. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And it is also particularly mentioned in Bhagavad Puran that the only royal lineage which was left was Magad, Jarasandh's
Mm-hmm.
lineage.
Right.
And Sadev continued
Yes.
that along with the help of other Pandavas.
Correct. Correct.
So that is the story of lineage from the Magadha point of view. But
Yes.
from the uh, Andhaka dynasty, Vrishni, Bhoj, and Yaduvanshi, we don't
Right.
have such evidences right
We don't know. We don't have the evidence. And just imagine, of course, if many of them had migrated outside, then it just got lost further.
now. Totally,
So
totally,
yeah.
got lost
Yeah.
for it. So, so what is the? Do you have a presentation to show today?
Yeah,
On
yes, actually, I have again 8 slides. Eight seems to be the magic number. Okay. And do you want me to jump in right into
yes,
it?
jump in right now.
Okay.
Yes,
All right. So let's do that, and then we'll have some time to discuss that. Additional questions you may have. Okay. So let show. Tell me when you see my slide on the screen.
correct. Male, female diversity imbalance.
Imbalance. Okay. So that's exactly what we are going to discuss, and so. Okay, so let's go to the Mahabharata times. Okay, 5561 BC, the year of Mahabharat war. At least that's based on my research. Okay, again, remember we use the logic of scientific discovery, the logic of scientific method. It has three corners: explanation, prediction, and testing. And then we have a theory at the top, like a conjecture, and then we have a background knowledge or agama, at the bottom. Now, what happened during the Mahabharat war? Okay, so I'm going to put there 3 points. So we all can agree to this. So if I'm saying, let's assume that 5561 BC is the year when the Mahabharat war happened. Okay, based on other evidence, and the significant death of men, I'm saying estimated 4 million based on that Akshohini calculation that I just pulled from a Wikipedia. Actually, people can go to Wikipedia and have a look at it. Okay, so that's that calculation. And then so that's like, okay, so that's the number. Then where did it happen? It happened in the northern India, like a Bharatvarsha. Okay, now keep in mind the yuddha, the war itself took place in Kurukshetra, but all the warriors and the kings had come from all India, and actually what we would consider outside India in today's time, far away. Like we are going all the way to Iran, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. That's an Uttara Madra, and then Uttara Kuru. I mean, the western part of China, what we consider western part of China today, and then going eastward to Myanmar, and all the way possibly to, I mean, what you call Thailand, and so on and so forth. Okay, Cambodia and that area. Okay, so it's a huge area, and I'll show a map of that. So that is the geographical area. Lots of men, only exclusively men have died, and it happened in 6th millennium BCE. Okay, so now that is a claim, I would say. Lot of men died in 5561 BCE in India, but they had come from all around India and outside India, what we would consider outside India. Now the question we want to ask is there a evidence for this thing? I mean, did this act, just like last time we saw Dwarka, flooding of Dwarka in 5525 BCE, and it left some evidence in geography, right, in oceanography records. Do we have such similar evidence of this human destruction, exclusive gender destruction, in our today's records? I mean, can we find those, through our modern science? That is the question. And I'm just, in the parenthesis, I said indeed, which we have evidence, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, and then let's see. And then, is it objectively testable? That's the biggest test for science. Okay, I mean, just a simple description is a good starting point, but is it objectively testable? The answer is yes. and the background knowledge we are going to use is genetics and physical anthropology. Okay, all right, so let's go there. So quickly, this is the whole area of India. Okay, so that's where the people came from. And if I have to draw a map, this is where some of the identified kingdoms who participated into Mahabharata. All right, and actually I would say the different people, all the kings came from this broader area who participated into the Mahabharata war. Okay, all right, now what I'm showing you on the screen is a diagram from the research paper. It's a research paper on genetics that was published in 2015. And what I want you to notice again, look at the color of those dots. These are the genetic data points that were taken. Okay, so India is like that forest green color called South Asia, the wrong name. Nobody should really call it South Asia. It's another colonial thing that is left behind, but let's go with that. So that's Indian area. Then what I also want you to notice, so I'm going to draw a picture there. That's the area where people came to fight in the Mahabharata war. So what does that include? That includes Near East. So that's modern day Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, possibly Iraq, but also Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and that area. Also part of Western China, and then going to the east to Myanmar and so on. This is very important. Okay, so South Asia, which is India, then the Near East, okay, which is we can say Iran, Iraq, that area, and to the East Asia, so we can call East and Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and all that. So those are the people who participated into the war. Now just keep this in mind, something very exciting that happens. Now let me ask you, Aditya ji, a question. Okay, I'm going to use a metaphor of a earthquake. Okay, so earthquake is a geological thing, and what happened in the Mahabharata war is a genetics thing, like significant exclusive male dominated destruction that happened. If I tell you, if you hear about a earthquake on the news, okay, what are the 2 or 3 key questions that come to your mind right away? What you want to know if you heard a news of an earthquake? What would those be?
Yeah, epicenter. Where is the epicenter? Where it happened? What was the intensity?
Right, right.
And what type of earthquake also sometimes.
Very good. Yeah, underwater, whatnot, right? But yeah, so epicenter, which is like what is the geographical location, then when it happened, right? I mean, just as a piece of information, and what was the intensity? Absolutely, right? And you said the type of earthquake too. Yeah, great. Okay. So exactly those. So if it's an earthquake, we want to know where is the epicenter. Why? Because that has implications, right? If it is important, close to the big city, unfortunately, a much bigger destruction is going to happen, and so on, right? How far it is from your place, you want to know that too, Then the second one, as you said correctly, the timing, okay, when exactly it happened. And in this case, we are going thousands of years back, but a different type of earthquake. And then, of course, you gave all correct answers, and a bonus answer you gave, okay. So the intensity, the Richter magnitude scale, okay. So think of this: where is the epicenter? What is the timing, and what was the intensity of this? Now, I want to take this only as a metaphor from a true earthquake. I want to take this to now a genetics earthquake, which was what the Mahabharata war was, like just like a Second World War, World War II. But this one was huge. Mahabharata war was much bigger than even a World War II, and especially when the population was much lower than what it was at the time of the Mahabharata war. Sorry, at the time of the World War II. So look what happened. Okay. So again, I'm bringing that same thing. So now I know where it happened. Is there evidence? And I'm saying, yes, there is a evidence. Let me just explain this graph. Very, very fascinating graph. It is from that 2015 genetics paper, Monica Carmin and others. What you are seeing, the y-axis, is the ratio of female diversity to male diversity. Now, for simplicity, you may simply think of this as a population, but it's really not the population. What we are really talking is the genetic variety among the female population, or among the from the female side, the genetic contribution added to the variety of the gene in any one of us, either you or me, from the feminine side. And what is that feminine side? We call that a X chromosome, okay? And the male side is a Y chromosome. Now, the way the genetics they do, actually, instead of a X chromosome, they go for they call it mitochondrial DNA, which is on the X side, on the female side. So we are looking at not the population, but for simplicity, we can assume a humongous variety in the female population as a ratio to the male diversity. So diversity is the right word in terms of genetic diversity. And look what happens there. So now you see the highest peak. There is some variation. We are going back to 150,000 years. And as I showed you on the map, the data is coming from all over the world. Okay. But notice, Aditya ji, what you see here, that highest peak there, that is a difference between the female diversity to male diversity. That ratio went as high as 16 or 17 when you see this peak. And if you want to know the timing of that peak, is think of this as the Richter scale, equivalent of a intensity of that divide. And it was 17:1 or 16:1. And so that's the first answer. What was the intensity of that divide? Extreme variation between female diversity versus male diversity. What we are saying is male diversity went down, significantly down. That's why the ratio is 17:1. And when did it happen? Surprise, surprise, but not a surprise if to anyone who knows about the Mahabharat war and when the Mahabharat war happened. 7,500 years ago. That is that vertical line, by the way, that I drew. Okay, we are going from 0 to 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, and so on. So that comes at 7,500 years ago. So I told you about the intensity, like a Richter scale. Okay, now, but what I have not told you is where did this happen? Correct? That is one. So we are going to do that now. Now what we are doing is, by each region, we are doing this curve slightly in a different fashion. Instead of going up, you can think of that as a going down, meaning exactly same thing. So when it goes down, that means the female diversity is much higher in comparison to male diversity. Like male diversity has gone significantly down. That is how you can visualize this. Again, what we have is x-axis is the thousands of years ago, and the y-axis is that variation. So now notice this dark forest green line, which represents India. Okay, do you see it, Aditya ji? Like this, yes. Dark green line here.
Yes, I can see.
If you come from the past, and this is a model, okay, so it doesn't go like a sharp at one point, but because it's a modeling exercise, mathematical model. But if you come from the past, like 13,000 years there, at 12,000 we assume everyone to be same, so variation with respect to that. You see the first one to notice the change is India. Okay, that dark green line comes down. Then notice it reaches the depth, it reaches the deeper first, then it stays there for the longest, and it is the last one to recover in terms of balancing of the variation of female diversity to male diversity. Finally it comes back, is the last one to come. Okay, now the vertical black line that I have drawn is exactly where the Mahabharat war happened. That I have drawn for a few reasons. Notice start from the bottom and notice the three lines which saw the bottom. So that orange color, if you notice this one, that orange represents Near East, which is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and that area. Like Uttara Kuru, Uttara Madra, and that area, and that they show up there. So they got affected. India, the local India itself got affected. And the one more that got affected, if you see the most, the blue line is what? Southeast and East Asia. I'm talking of Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and that area. Okay, so those three were the most affected. And then what you find, I'm drawing another line, like just to give you that reference as a 8,000 as a reference. Another line I am drawing just as a horizontal to see which are below those three. So India and surrounding area was the most affected, which contributed most to that variation of female diversity to male diversity ratio of 17. Okay. Again, if I'm drawing another line at that 6,500 years, which is 4,500 BCE, there is a reason for it, Aditya ji. See, this is the time when Saraswati, the monsoon went down and Saraswati started drying up. and that is when the outward migrations from of Indians started again. They were always doing it in the past, but now this was a significant migration. And this is very important for anyone to understand why you see the effect on Europe. Europe is yellow. Okay, if you see Europe, no difference through these say 6,000 years, but after that 4,500 years, look what happened to Europe. There is a sudden variation, down there, and then it recovered. Also, you will find the same thing for slightly late for Central Asia. And do you know why is this happening? See, these Indians, the Indian families who now have a diverse feminine diversity, like the mitochondrial, X chromosome diversity, but very limited Y chromosome male diversity. These people are migrating. They're populating these places of Central Asia and Europe, and that's why they're seeing a delayed signal. What happened to India? Now they are carrying that effect. Like somewhere you just imagine people infected with a disease, and now they're going after 6 months to some other place, and now you see an infection happening there too. Now in this case, it's not an infection. In this case, it's a male diversity in the genes, in the offsprings. Okay, so that's why I drew this line. And quickly, the last line, that is to show, if you look at the forest green line, that is the last one to recover. In fact, it did not start recovering there. It took like 3,000, 2,000 years, meaning only 2,000 years ago, Indian diversity, male, female diversity came closer to each other. Okay, now this can be complicated for someone, but that's just to summarize it. So think of it as an epicenter. So that significant intensity, that signal we saw, 16:1, female diversity to male diversity, the epicenter was India, and of course the surrounding area. It was a genetics upheaval because a significant reduction in male gene diversity. Okay, how significant? 1:16. It occurred around 7,500 years ago. Just like, here you see it, but you see it very well in the previous signal that I showed you, a very nice, beautiful peak at 7,500 years ago. It had the deepest impact in terms of magnitude, in terms of first to experience the change, and the longest time to recover, that is that dark forest green line, and it was in India. Okay, this is such a powerful signal, and that is, there are many papers written after Monica Carmin's paper written in Stanford. You said we have a Stanford students listening to it today. There is a paper written recently by Stanford research team, and there are a couple other papers written. And what they have speculated is, they have said, you like this, Adityaji, the word they have used is, they have said possibly like, a fight between cousins, between cousins in a given tribe. Now, they may not be aware of the Mahabharat war, but if you look at the Mahabharata, it is, there are many other people participated, but it was a war between cousins, if you think of it, the Dhritarashtra's son and the Pandu's son. Okay, so very interesting, although they did not know any of that, and they are not referring to Mahabharata, but that's what the data is showing you, perfectly matching with the time. And now, if this has, of course, there is nothing here not to be convinced. But I told you, and I will show you that quickly, and then we will get into other discussion, is that now suppose this is only limited to human beings, which is actually a phenomenal evidence. But let me show you evidence for the mouse. And Aditya, tell me if you have seen this before. Have you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, this is phenomenal. So what happens, and this is, I'll quickly tell you the summarize. This is a Bonhomie paper 2007, another genetics paper, this time focused only on the domestic mouse. Now, domestic mouse has multiple varieties. There are many, but there are 3 dominant varieties, that you can see some of the names there. And when this research team, I think from Germany, when they studied the domestic mice around the world, no place left. Actually, they went all the way to Polynesia, of course, to whole Americas, North America, South America, Africa, entire Europe, whole of Asia. I mean, they didn't leave all the way to Madagascar, if you see there, they went everywhere, looked at the samples, lots of samples. And what it is telling them, this is a genealogy tree for domestic mouse, for domestic mice. What it is saying is that all the roads lead to India, with the domestic mouse. Now, some people may just say, okay, it's a mouse, fine, something might have happened. No, it's not to be taken lightly because it's very significant. The domestic mouse is connected with a settled civilization. Domestic mouse is connected with a settled agriculture-based civilization. Okay, and so whenever there are houses and agriculture, storage of grains, and that's where these mouse stay. And so, how did they migrate? They migrate with people migrating, taking away with them the agriculture and everything. They also migrated with the commerce. And sometime, some other time, we can talk about the evidence of agriculture and navigation in India. Going to ancient times. And so, those are the two strong dominant forces: the agriculture and navigation, meaning commerce. Those were responsible for taking this mouse around the world. And based on a genetic clock, when they try to date the timing of this, now it's not always easy. It gets even challenging in case of a mouse. But even the conservative estimates for these migrations are more than 10,000 years ago. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 25,000, even some estimates going back to 35,000 years ago. So agriculture existed, commerce existed, and it went from India to outside, and along with the domestic mouse. So this is my last slide for today. So I will stop sharing so that we can talk and then wrap up.
There is a story where a mouse goes to a sage,
Hmm.
says that cat is troubling me. You know the story actually. I can
No,
tell.
but go ahead. People will enjoy it.
And so the sage, the sadhu, makes him a cat.
Hmm.
So then again, dog is troubling him. He goes to the sage again. Sadhu says the dog is again troubling him.
Hmm.
So Sadhu is merciful. It makes him a dog. And then he says the tiger is troubling him
Hmm.
because a tiger or leopard, they come to eat dogs
Hmm.
sometimes. So he makes him a tiger. And the mouse then tries to catch hold of the sadhu himself.
Hmm.
And the sadhu
The
tells him,
tiger, you
"Puna
mean? The
Moshika."
tiger tries to catch hold, right? Yeah.
So the tiger goes after the sadhu. So sadhu tells him, Puna Mushika Bhava.
Huh.
Again become a mouse.
Become a mouse. Yeah.
You know? So I think the cradle of the world civilization is Bharat.
Mhm.
And I must commend you, Nilesh ji, that you have done a phenomenal research in every
Thank you.
sphere. And I'm really impressed by it. And also it brings a credence to the thought that the world started from Bharat, learned from Bharat, and ultimately is going to come back to Bharat.
Mhm.
Because I think the way we are all speaking up and asserting our
Hmm.
identity, I think
Hmm.
that's the change now. Now, my last question to you is on this topic of
Hmm.
Mahabharata, and I think you have very conclusively proven your dates which you have presented.
Hmm.
And we will continue this session on we have many other topics to cover.
Right.
One of the things is when we talk about evolution of man,
Hmm.
and I don't like the terms Iron Age, Copper
Hmm.
Age, Silver Age. I don't like
Correct.
that
Right.
because those are imposition. Because the Western world is very I would say Western academics,
Mhm.
very expert in creating terms and
Hmm.
nomenclatures
Hmm.
and defining those terms very well.
Hmm. Hmm.
But those definitions are done to prove their own identity, not of my identity,
Right.
because they are searching for their identity.
Right.
So, what is the basis that we need to invent so that we capture our history based on our benchmarks? Like, for
Hmm.
example, the biggest benchmark we have Krishna leaving the planet,
Hmm.
and that's where the Kali starts.
Right.
And that's where but right now we have to base it on BC and AD, which we all know.
Correct.
You have also said it on the show many times that it is just a just a randomly selected some date,
Right.
and that's where it evolved. What is your
Right.
opinion on that, sir?
Okay. No. Great question. Couple of few points I'll make quickly. One thing is you said it correctly that they use the Western world came up with the Iron Age and a Bronze Age and a Copper Age and whatnot. I would say when they came up with these things, they were not necessarily bad ideas. Okay, they had some utility. I mean, you have to make progress with whatever is available to you. And so, as a rudimentary thing in archaeology or otherwise, so they made use of the copper thing and Iron Age and whatnot. Okay, so that time it was okay. It's no longer really a sound idea. For example, what they didn't realize, a copper doesn't rust. I mean, it will form a protective coating and it stays. Iron actually rusts and it gets dissolved. Okay, it disappears. Okay, that is also reason we won't find iron tools, instruments which are much older. But that was kind of lost on them. So initially maybe it's a good idea, but right now it doesn't is not useful. Another problem with that idea is, see, the original idea may be flexible, but they made it very bad. For example, like in India, Iron Age, they said it's like a 600 BC. The problem is then we found something in 800 BC, which is iron, then 1000 BC, then 1600 BC to 2200 BC. So every time we find something new object which is made out of iron, the Iron Age goes backwards. So it's no longer absolute thing. Quickly, I will mention we should do the same thing for Yuga also, because that's our creation. And that is, I will say, while Yuga is a wonderful concept, using the Yuga, the Kali Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and then Satya Yuga, I have studied this for 30 years. And I mean, there's 432,000, which is a purely astronomy number, but very carelessly using that for writing the history of India is a disaster. Okay, we should not use that. That is my very assertive point about that. Now, that is a good unit to be used for some other things, like say the age of the universe. Then the Yuga is a perfect one, just like a light year. So that's a good one. And I think there was one more point that you mentioned. I wanted to answer, but I forgot. You said so the
Yeah.
Iron Age, then the Yuga, and one more point you had.
Uh, it's a Kali Yuga memory, so it's gone.
No. So the question you ask is, for example, we are using right now, forced to use BC or
Right,
CE.
BC, yes.
Okay, and what reference? Again, I will say, see, for now, the globally, right now at least, the BC CE is the norm, right? I mean, we are telling all our birth years in that norm. We don't have to necessarily do that for all the time, but for practical reasons, we are forced to use it right now and for foreseeable future. But on that, I will tell you a good news. That's something I'm working on. If you are familiar with the Bharat Dinadarshika, that
Right.
I started with one of the oldest, if not the oldest, living tradition of Panchang makers in India, Date Panchang, based in Pune. Okay, so that is the Bharat Dinadarshika. So we started with that, and what we were using there, besides Shalivan and besides the other Vikram Samvat, is Mahabharat Samvat.
Mm.
And I will just conclude. So our goal is to start with using slowly introduce the concept of a Mahabharat Samvat and a year. So 2020 today, we should able to say that in a Mahabharat Samvat.
Yeah.
And going backwards, so for example, Ramayana, we will say that as a BMS, before Mahabharat Samvat. So some work is under progress.
So I think that brings me to another point is on the calendars also. Shak Samvat and Vikram Samvat, which is Vikramaditya's time it started, and then also the Shak Samvat, Vikram Samvat, and one more.
Yudhishthir Samvat we hear. Yeah.
So these are different Samvat. I think we should have a separate discussion on that because
Correct.
we
Yeah.
have to define our own calendar and move away from Gregorian calendar.
Right. And Saptarshi, there is a Saptarshi also. But quickly, I will say, I mean, we'll discuss that as a separate session. But all of these, Shalivan, Vikram, Saptarshi, Yudhishthir, they all have the limitations of what we have with the BC or CE calendar. Whereas, like something like a Mahabharat timing, which is like can be done with astronomy and with a very powerful, solid evidence. Those are good landmarks to use as a reference for our calendar. That's what I'm convinced about.
No, I would like to call it a Nilesh Oak Samvat.
Well, no, I would prefer that it's a Mahabharat Samvat, so people know. Now you understand a little bit of Marathi. I will quickly say what Dhaneshwara says. He says, "Asate pana lopo, nama rupa harapo."
Right.
Let my identity, let my existence just get dissolved, and let my name be forgotten. So I'm not gung ho on my name being remembered, but let the Mahabharata Samvat be remembered.
I think most of the calendars are named after the creator, and that's a normal.
Right. Maybe in a small script, instead of so Mahabharat Samvat, and instead of a trademark TM, they can put up there NO, Nilesh Oak,
No.
No.
Thank you so much, and I think viewers really enjoyed it. and there are many questions coming up. Do ask those questions on YouTube because it's easier to answer, and Nilesh
Hmm.
himself can answer those
Yeah,
questions.
in the comments, YouTube comments, so
YouTube
that even I can go there and answer.
can answer, and also it becomes a public repository, and many people
Correct.
can access it later on. Most of these videos are timeless in many ways because very unique. So thank you, Nilesh ji, as usual, a fantastic presentation, and I really admire your intellect and your hard work in doing this. And so
Thank you for all the great work you are doing. That's how I get to share this with so many people.
Sattology team is very, very grateful to you. And so we'll keep the next Friday another show, and the topic will be announced in advance. And one of these weeks we'll make it Facebook Live because we have large audience there. And I'm not a very social media savvy person, so I cannot do that. So thank you all so much for watching, and keep watching. And this was amazing, amazing show. And I think we used the modern science very well in terms of the impacting the world behavior. And also, and you said it very rightly, in the Sri Parva of Mahabharat, it is mentioned that one of the biggest problems Yudhishthira Maharaj sees is repopulating the society. That's the biggest problem he sees, and he says that my biggest work in the next my next future is going to repopulate that society.
Hmm.
So thank you all for watching, and namaskar Nilesh ji, and namaskar all the viewers. Thank you.
Thank you again.